Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. If nothing else, I'd be quite happy if you just spend the next 10 to 15 minutes thinking about yourselves. If you want to listen, that's fine, but if nothing else, something you might get out of tonight is think about yourself for the next 15 minutes. Just out of interest, does anyone, or any of the first, in the last 30 days, spent an hour thinking about themselves? There's normally someone who goes, I spend every hour thinking about myself. But having a deep think about themselves, maybe 3-4% of the audience. We're here. So I called this talk Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. I'm a physiotherapist by background. That's one of my offices. I've worked there for the last 25 years. I spent 12 years with Middlesex sitting there. This was in the days before risk assessment, so Mike Gatting was allowed to walk around in a jock strap without lots of paperwork being filled out. And then I moved downstairs. She moved downstairs in cricket, and I've spent 11 years on the board there. It's quite a nice place. Ooh, hey, wasn't that bad, was it, computer? Let's have a go, shall we? So this was the sort of person who greeted me 25 years ago. That's a chap called David Boone, used to bat number 3 for Australia, world-class international batsman. Fag in one hand, beer in the other hand. I think he holds the record for the most amount of beer drunk on a flight from Sydney over to London at 54 cans. That's pretty impressive was that not only the consumption, but the fact he managed to walk through customs and passport control. I think the previous record holder had to be wheeled through on one of those baggage trolleys. But there is a reason for putting that picture up, because it makes me reflect on what has changed in cricket and what has changed in cricketers in 25 years. And the answer to the first question is actually not a lot. Cricket still goes on for quite a long time. All right, they've got 2020 and razzmatazz, but there's still 11 aside. They play with a bat and a ball. The wicket's 22 yards long. It's often a bit boring. It seems to rain quite a lot when they try and play. A lot of the basics around cricket are exactly the same, but the input into these people is absolutely phenomenal. Kerr mentioned Kath Bishop, the rower, and her support team of 17. When I started in cricket, there used to be a coach who sat in the corner and occasionally used to be able to breathe. They would tend to be really quite old senior pros, and a physio, just in case something went wrong. Now they're without doubt more a support team in the dressing room than they are players. There might be a right, there may be a wrong in that, but every team in the world is doing it. And it's a competitive field. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it isn't. And it's interesting that businesses are now looking at investing in their people. I think the last 20 years has seen this great technological boom. I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to see a little bit more about human beings, people, leadership, maybe being supported by technology. So it's not surprising when one looks at these surveys. This was probably a far inferior one that was done, I'm afraid. But I picked a figure, 91%. That's the number of HR directors that were interviewed by a company called Right Management last year, who felt that the most important factor in employability over the next 5 years was going to be your ability to cope, your ability to deal with change. They felt that was more so than what you know, who you know, when you know them, your ability to cope and deal with change. I thought I'd just tell you 3 stories using numbers. I tend to use a lot of numbers to bring these things to life. Some of these have been alluded to earlier. But one of the issues we have is doctors and nurses are becoming very good at keeping people alive. Life expectancy is increasing. In 1911 in the UK, a census was done. Would anyone like to hazard a guess as how many centenarians there were in the UK?
25.
25, not bad, sir. 64. Okay, in 2011 it was done again. Where have we got to now? It's higher. 13,000. And the Office of National Statistics suggests that in 100 years' time, some 25% of the population, or 20 million people, could possibly live to the age of 100. If you thought it was tough now, folks, just be glad you're not around in 100 years' time. But obviously, with that sort of data, the workforce is going to be ageing. This is a significant issue for the employer. The second story I want to briefly touch upon is sick people. This is some data from a global bank that we work with. They were quite happy for it to be shared, as long as I didn't name them. But we worked with their risk team last year, an organisation, 6,256 people. Apparently the average salary for them was $50,000. Their sickness rate that they claimed was 6%. That equates to over $18.5 million lost, just through sickness absence. Not a loss in productivity or anything like that, but just actually we're spending money on people paying them, but they're not at work. There's something called presenteeism. This is when people turn up for work when they probably shouldn't because they're unwell. And what do? They give everyone else their germs, so that means other people go off sick. But more importantly, they make mistakes because they're not functioning at their best. And then they help other people make mistakes because they're not functioning at their best. Presenteeism is said to account for around about 1 to 1.5 times the level of absenteeism. So if we put that into that risk department, that's another $28 million that's gone. So the numbers are starting to stack up. Let's try and be a little bit more positive, shall we? Let's look at the bottom line. If one could improve that by 10% or improve productivity and performance by 10%, that's equivalent to an extra 23 working days a year. If I put that into that risk department, that equates to another $32 million. If I put it across the whole of that organisation, which was 86,000 people, we dropped the average salary down a little bit here. We're now looking at over $359 million. So whilst I know a lot of organisations would like to give you a hug and make you feel great and we're here for the good of mankind and everything, actually it's probably numbers that lead people to make decisions if one is being totally brutal. As I said at the beginning, I almost want the next little phase to be a blank canvas. I just want to introduce you to a couple of metrics that we use. One subjective, one objective, and then just a little thought around culture and how that can drain people or inspire people. The first little model I want to introduce is something that I call ITZ, in the zone. It's the balancing act between energy and focus. And of course, like all of these models, where's the best place to be? Top right-hand corner, highly energized, highly focused. That's what I call purposeful. Good place to be. This is a quadrant that I've definitely been in this week. We've had 2 really big tender pitches to do, and I've also had to do 3 talks. High energy, but focus is lacking. That's what I call Roadrunner. You know that cartoon character who runs around everywhere, and at the end of the day, Roadrunner's done loads and loads and loads. But if you ask Roadrunner what on earth Roadrunner's done, they go, I haven't got a clue. I've done loads, but I haven't got a clue. Down here, the procrastination corner. We all go there occasionally. You know those moments when you think, I better make a few phone calls to see who's available for that conference call we're going to have next week where we're going to be discussing the phone call policy moving forward. But maybe I'll go and see Dave and have a cup of coffee first. We all go there occasionally. And up there, the top left, we know what we should do, but we just simply don't have the energy to do it. Fatigue, and then potentially burnout. So the first thing I want you to just ask yourself quietly, we don't need great big hands up, me here, is think, what percentage of the year have you spent in each of these quadrants? Has this been a really dominant one? Because if it has, you might get out of jail and move this way, which gives you a break, but you might not get out of jail and go into it and go there. Because the goal is for you as individuals and teams to try and be as purposeful as possible at work and away from it. To have energy for everything in life. Life is a perpetual motion. It's not just about 9 to 5, or 8 to 6, or 7 to 12, whatever you work. It's about having energy for everything, and ideally the things that are truly important to you. So that's a little model to think about. We use a little profiler when we work with people. It's called an energy and performance profiler. We look at 4 areas. We look at the way people think. And you know what? Most of the time people think they're in a reasonable place. Scores tend to be quite high. We look at the way they work. So it's about 80 questions, this. Oh dear, this is starting to go wrong, isn't it? And the way people recharge, not so good. We often break this down a bit further and look at a few of the questions. Here's a one question. I feel a sense of achievement when I reach my personal goals. Hands up, who feels a sense of achievement when they reach their personal goals? Yeah, you're probably much in line with the 96% of people do. What's interesting on the survey is the very next question is this. I set goals and revisit them regularly. Oh dear. So sometimes we sort of know it, but we don't do it. So that's another little metric to think about. The second thing I want to talk about is technology. I know it's sort of been a bit of a taboo word tonight. I was a bit really worried when people have been going on about technology. I think, sugar, I'm going to be talking about technology. So we try and put some objective data behind this. In particular, we try and put some objective data around John's talk around the autonomic nervous system. We collect it through something called a bodyguard monitor. It's a very advanced heart rate monitor. So we do collect heart rate, but more importantly, we collect something called heart rate variability. And I'm just going to give you a very quick physiology lesson. So Kerr here, he's a little bit stressed tonight, hostess with the mostest, etc. He's got a pulse of 60, believe that, you'll believe anything, I'm making that up. He's got a pulse of 60, he's in a state of sympathetic dominance. He's releasing cortisol and adrenaline, his blood pressure will be slightly raised, and his heart will be beating like a metronome. 1 beat a second. John, on the other hand, look at his body language. Cool as a cucumber, really relaxed, talk done, happy days. He's in a state of parasympathetic dominance. His blood pressure will be slightly reduced. He's also got a pulse of 60, identical to Kerr's. But his heart is beating quickly for 5 or 10 seconds and then slowly for 5 or 10. Quickly for 5 or 10, then slowly. He's in a state of parasympathetic dominance. So the heart tells us a story. Identical heart rates, but two totally different patterns that have been driven by our autonomic nervous system and the hormones that it influences. Cortisol and adrenaline, Kerr, DHEA, recovery hormones, John. So we measure that. We measure it very accurately. We sort of create lots of numbers, but we then hopefully make sense of it by producing charts. I'm just going to show you 4 examples. This is a city trader. This is a 24-hour trace. The reddy brown colour is when that person is in a state of sympathetic dominance. Most of us will be during the day. It's tough. We're stimulated. The northern line's the northern line, etc. The blue is when this person's exercised, so we've got physical load, non-physical load. They've gone to bed just before midnight. They've gone straight into what we call parasympathetic dominance, John's colour. Looking pretty good, huh? This is the same person the very next day. The only recovery they're getting is between 5:30 and 6:15 in the morning. They went to sleep, no, they didn't go to sleep there. They went to sleep at exactly the same time as the night before. So although they're resting, they're not restoring. They're still in this state of sympathetic dominance where cortisol and adrenaline are acting as turbochargers on our cells, and we don't have the recovery hormones that act as that buffer. The difference here was this person took clients out for dinner, around about 2/3 of a bottle of wine, or that's what they ended up to, and ate late. So eating late, we've got to digest the food, we've got to deal with the toxicity of alcohol, and mental engagement all day and all evening. Now I'm sure this is something we all do, I mean I certainly do it occasionally, but I'm very aware about what it does to me. On day 1 you can see this person's battery levels went down. They do for all of us, that's why we go to bed, we're tired. But the recharge was effective. On day 2, the battery levels went down, but the recharge was ineffective, and I think it's very easy to understand. One's levels of performance will dip, one's levels of thinking will dip, one's levels of leadership will dip, and one's body language will diminish if one's permanently in that state. That's a very obvious example. Here's something that we more typically see. It's what I call the dripping tap. That's a 3-day trace, 72 hours, and you can just see every day the battery's going down a bit, and a bit more, and a bit more. And by Friday we're right down here somewhere. But that's all right, isn't it? We've got the weekend coming up. Oh no, that's where we go horribly wrong. The first 20,000 days worth of data, we analysed the toughest day of the week physiologically was Saturday. So sometimes we don't give ourselves the best chance to recharge and recover for a whole host of reasons, and it isn't just party. You know, work sometimes gives us structure, sometimes gives us support. We have job descriptions, you know, we have skill sets, we have training. Sometimes at the weekends we don't really know what we should be doing. I did put this slide in about shift work. I didn't know whether to do shift work or international travel. I went for shift work because I think these days, this is looking at a nurse and the difference between an early shift, late shift and night shift. And you can see how early shift, the sleep recovery is really pretty good. Late shift, they finish work here, they go to bed here, but there's sort of a 2-3 hour latent period before they go into recovery. Night shift, nothing. These people have a 4-year decreased life expectancy. And I think with sort of the global working practices that we have, more and more of us are working like shift workers. We have to deal with the East, we have to deal with America. So this is starting to become relevant in traditional office work as well. Second last one, this is a chap who was on the board of one of the banks that collapsed a few years ago. I'm a physio after all. He came to see me complaining of his back. Told me about his back for 20 seconds, he told me about his life for 20 minutes. I had option A, let's go click, 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 push, 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 bend your knees when you lift, all of that sort of stuff, or hey, why don't we look at a few other things, mate? So we put a monitor on him, and we saw this. This was heavy exercise for an hour and a half, just before bedtime. I was thinking, this is going to be interesting. And I said to him, what's going on here? He said, well, I'm so frustrated. I've gone and bought myself a punch bag, but that's really good because it's exercise, isn't it? Exercise is great. So he was going home after work, trying to sort out this bank that was going everywhere, probably putting on the Rocky theme music and then for an hour and a quarter. But exercise is a stimulant. So if we do it at the wrong time, at the wrong intensity, look what happens to the stress response. And the last one I want to show you on the objective data, this is actually a cancer nurse, and this is my favourite slide of all time. We measured her over a long period of time, and I said to her, when's the most stressful time of your week? She said, it's when I do that clinic, the really tough clinic. And I said, well, I'm sure that's the most stressful time. This is her doing the clinic. Really relaxed. So sometimes it's not always the obvious that's causing us the problems, and that is why the mirror is so important. If we're doing things where we're really well trained, we're really empathetic to, we're really closely aligned with our values, we're often in a very, very good place. And I've seen HR directors sacking people and they're in this colour. I've seen them leading up to that event being in a high brown colour. But when we're actually getting on and doing, we often go to a good place. This is interesting overnight, really, really struggling. And when you talk to this person, she said, well, actually, I'm really worried about getting my PhD in 6 weeks' time. Woohoo! Let's cut to the chase here. What you thought was a problem, you're absolutely fine now. Now let's look at some strategies to help you deal with something that you didn't think about. Because we often jump to what we think is obvious. Organisationally, we often see this sort of thing. People think they don't sleep enough. Do you know what? Most people do. If one's been totally brutal. So this is some objective data from an organisation. It's about 400 measurements, I think. So that was their collective data in terms of what they think, but this is what we're actually seeing. I feel rested and energetic. Oh no, I don't feel rested and energetic. I'm actually probably close-ish on that one. Not far. So 1 in 3 was actually getting effective restorative sleep and recharge. I exercise, yeah, I do. I'm all right. I do enough exercise just to be healthy. 51%. Average was 15 minutes a day. Nowhere near. So often what we think is way out of line. So just for you, one thing I'd like you to think about is going back to this quadrant and these 7 pillars of performance, and think, I'm just going to read them out in a minute, but just think which ones of those might you think about as an action to stay in this top right hand corner a little bit more often. P is about psychology, positive thinking and being purposeful and present. E is around the environment. R is rest, recovery, recuperation. F is fuel. O, organisation. R, responsibility and values. And M, movement. This one is really interesting because people understand if I drink loads of coffee or alcohol late at night, I'm going to run into problems. If I don't exercise, I'm going to run into problems. But this is a big one. And organisations spend an awful lot of time trying to build up vision, missions and cultures, and they're all underpinned by values. Values are everything. And what we often find is people run into the biggest problems physiologically, i.e. their batteries don't recharge, when their values are here and the organisation's values are there. And often we sit down and talk to people, they go, well, it's all about values, it's all about values. And I say to them, right, tell me, what are your values? And they haven't got a clue. So another thing to think about when you're looking in that mirror are, what are my values? And maybe we should actually not get so obsessed by values because they tend to be just the same old, same old. I'm really sorry if I cocked up and put someone's values in here because I wasn't quite sure what organisation. But respect, safety, excellence, courage, one team. Anyone know who that is? BP. Pride, achievement, respect, innovation, care. That's Imperial Healthcare Trust. Respect, integrity, service, excellence, stewardship. Barclays. Authenticity, integrity, performance, unity. It's pretty obvious, that one. And that's FIFA. And this is where these sort of value statements tumble down sometimes. So I think actually sitting between values and what we all aim for, success, are people and culture. We try and encourage people to think about what culture, what behaviours they want to choose to become their drivers, and also identify the behaviours that are going to be their drainers. Everyone's good at thinking what drives us, but we don't always articulate what really hacks us off. So a whole load of different varieties with pictures, but we will encourage small organisations. Sorry, that went too quickly. to produce, oh, maybe it's not going to do it. 5 drivers and 5 drainers, and that's their DNA. And every single day they see that up on the wall, and that's what they try and achieve. And every day someone's brought into the business as an induction, that's what they're taught about. Because that's going to be the culture that helps them deliver. So, mirror, I guess what I've tried to do is look at 3 things. Recognise where you're at. Recharge efficiently. Don't rest, but restore. And respire effectively, because for me, culture is actually the respiration system of a business. And I'll stop there. Thank you.